Hello and welcome to this episode of the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. And I'm your host Marcus, and today we're here with Alan Moore and Yoko from GrowVC. Before continuing the discussion, let's look at our member highlight from the community this week, and it's a startup called Yoghies. And Yoghies is a do-it-yourself frozen yogurt and healthy dessert bar, where each customer can be their own master dessert chef. The concept builds on ease and simplicity, and it allows the customer to be in complete control of their dish. You can follow Yoghies in our community, as well as on yoghies.com. That's YOGHIES.com. Now to today's topic. And today we're talking about facing the modern world as it is and creating sustainable value in the shifting and often challenging landscape. And Alan, first off, you've been traveling a whole lot this fall, talking about making sense of our non-linear world, and in the process meeting different local communities. What's the general atmosphere been in these crowds, and how has the message been received?
I genuinely think that people are really starting to understand that it's not business as usual. That in many ways they are aware that we are, for whatever reason, in a process of transition, and that continuing to do things in a kind of linear fashion has only one kind of inevitable goal, which means that their businesses will not survive in this world that we're living in today. So I think that people are kind of really sort of more open to, really thinking about different types of business processes, really thinking about how, say, mobile communications can be actually embedded into the heart of any enterprise, or how communication technologies, GrowVC being a fantastic example of enabling someone to completely re-engineer the way that an entire industry can actually think about itself.
And I think that plays in with the concept of disruption. We've had lots of different examples of those in the recent times with companies that have brought on great innovations and changed the way we do things. Where do you think this is going to go in the future?
Well, I think that I think we really are at a kind of change the world sort of moment, and it doesn't matter whether if you look at Google, for example, Google is a huge media player, but it didn't actually ask permission to become that. It just went away and built it. I think in the same way that Local Motors is a company that I've quite often championed, which is completely disrupting the way that we think about the entire kind of ecosystem of how we are going to build or design, create and build cars, and how that economy works. It's interesting that people always think that somehow disruption, if we're really looking at it on a kind of, on a scale that's the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution, that it started off in music. It then has sort of ran through the media world. So Craigslist, for example, completely changed the economic model for paid for classified advertising, initially in the Bay Area and then on a global basis. Banking seems to think, or the financial world seems to think, that this is not going to affect them. And so I think that what we will see is that ultimately people get to a point where they see that the current industry that they're in, for whatever reason, is failing, it's dysfunctional, it's not bringing through new learnings, new innovation. And so people then start to really understand how, in a non-linear way, they can actually start to kind of re-engineer the entire process in terms of how things get done. And that's when it becomes extremely disruptive. So I think we're on the early journey where we're really kind of bringing very different types of models into play.
And I think that we start to see it in finance sector also now. Of course, there have been this banking crisis and a lot of issues in many countries, in the US, Iceland, now Ireland, and basically it indicates that also the finance sector doesn't work so optimal way. And another thing is that people are losing their trust to existing finance institutions. And I think that it means that even finance is very traditional area, and that people are conservative. People are ready to look for new solutions, something that is more transparent and more open. And now we see also more crowdfunding activities, for example, in the US. And I think that that is positive, because I don't think that we have never thought that we can be alone. Of course, in certain areas, we want to be the best one and offer the best solutions, but it's positive to see different kind of solutions. And for example, different kind of companies need different kind of funding solutions also.
Absolutely.
With the notion of transparency and openness, there's been the very topical discussion in the recent days about WikiLeaks and the different things going on there. What do you think that's a signal of?
I think it's a very interesting one, because I think that, you know, if we just kind of rewind very, very slightly, but, you know, 2005 was the year that, you know, YouTube, Facebook and MySpace were born around, you know, with Bebo as well, and Face Party. Now, they're interesting because I think they are poster children of something that had actually, in fact, been in gestation for a very long period of time. I kind of like to remind people that, you know, it's only in 5 years that we've gone from not talking about really social media, particularly, say, in the UK or Europe, and social networking, to it have become a core part of the conversation. Now, if everything then is about social, we need to then start to think about what drives socialness, and trust is absolutely up there. Can I trust you? And I think that, you know, without kind of, you know, being in this conversation for or against the WikiLeaks thing, I think what WikiLeaks does do is challenge the notion of, you know, how much trust and transparency should be in all organs of our society and government. So it's actually part of a much, much bigger conversation about the fact that in today's world, you have to actually build trust into the very process of what you do, and transparency to the point where it's almost impossible to behave in an opaque manner.
Yeah, this is of course complex issue, and I think that we must admit that there have been some people who have done something that is illegal behind these cases. But at the same time, I agree with Alan that this is also an indicator that it is more and more difficult to hide things also, and I think that whatever will be the rules and laws, it means that people must take into account that a kind of transparency might come also to their own area, and I think that it means that all people are somehow forced to think also really what they are doing and how they are doing things, and so on, so that you cannot anymore count always on some traditional structures and rules. And of course, it is complex issue that there are some people always who, let's say, go over a border. But I think that this is one indicator of some big changes what are happening.
And let's touch on velocity in today's world, and that especially of the pace of innovation and progress. And we had Eric Ries on our podcast recently, and he claimed that he believes that we're on the brink of an entrepreneurial renaissance, and that the exponential pace of progress and innovation is actually only just starting. Alan, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually really interesting in looking at velocity in a number of different ways. Is something that I talk about, in that, again, if you look at sort of, you know, what is happening in all industries across the world in many ways, you know, they aren't able to bring through new innovation. In fact, existing structures kind of almost stop that type of innovation. Yet, in fact, the sort of, you know, the nonlinear world and the kinds of communication technologies that we're building enables the velocity